Guess what's back? Business and Brews, where real business talk meets real people and always fueled by a good brew. This time we're going podcast first, bite-sized, insightful, and built for conversations you'll want to share. I'm your host, Matt Pierce, founder and CEO of Immediate, and I'll be sitting down with leaders, entrepreneurs, and friends to talk about leadership, growth, and the stories that make business worth talking about. So grab your favorite brew, pull up a chair, and let's talk business the way it's meant to be talked about. Business and Brews, back, bolder, and better than ever. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Business and Brews. I'm your host, Matt Pierce, and we've got a special one for you today. No guests. This is just going to be me chatting for a few minutes. And if any of you have been with us for a while, you may remember back in, I think it was December of 22, I actually interviewed myself. It was my children's favorite episode. They go back and watch it on YouTube every now and again, where I ask myself questions and then we panned over and I answered them. That was a fun one for me to do. This is not going to be that. Just for any of you who are about ready to click stop and exit real quickly. This is going to be one where we talk about financial literacy. And the reason is April is Financial Literacy Month. And so it, as you would imagine, exists for a reason. There's a real lack of financial literacy in our country. And it's one of the reasons that we started Immediate and have been working so hard and tirelessly over the past few years to make sure that we're helping the American workforce. What we like to say is find and sustain financial happiness. And so many of you may not know this, but 64% of the American workforce lives paycheck to paycheck. So it's 180 million people in the U.S. workforce, 64% of that. I'm going to test my math knowledge here real quick. It's probably going to be around 115 to 120 million people. And so that's a big number, right? That's a big number of people who are feeling the weight of rising gas prices and perpetual inflation that we feel like has been had gas poured on it since COVID 6 years ago. And if you're like me, there's times, whether you're living paycheck to paycheck today or at one point you were, there are those times where you had this feeling of, if something unexpected happens between now and Friday, I'm in major trouble, right? And so I want to talk a little bit about that today and give some kind of practical, actionable takeaways that I hope will be helpful for those of you who are listening. Financial literacy in trying to help people understand what's going on here and better understand their own personal finances. It's largely because this is a system that most people were not taught how to navigate, right? It's no fault of anybody's. It's really, we're not taught financial wellness in schools growing up. A lot of the understanding that we have personally comes down to the way we were raised, right? And so I was fortunate enough to be raised in a Dave Ramsey household where, we did our best not to take on any debt. We bought used cars and drove them till the wheels fell off. And we did a lot of things that, for me, growing up, I saw that as that was normal, right? And not everybody had that. Everybody has their own different ways you were brought up and different relationship with money. And so the idea here today is to kind of set this up and walk through and help really create some foundational elements of kind of what financial literacy is and isn't, and hopefully put you guys on a path, like I said, with some actionable steps of things you can do to make your financial life a little less stressful and hopefully allow you to navigate that. And so one of the things that I always like to point out is that this is not living paycheck to paycheck is not just tied to lower income brackets. We see people at Immediate regularly who make six figures who use our earned wage access platform on a regular basis. I do think that's quite frankly, it was a little fascinating to me as we started building this out and having more and more users come online and seeing people that were making, and when I say six figures, I don't necessarily mean people that are making $105,000. I mean, we've seen people that make over $200,000 who have made earned wage access transactions, meaning they're accessing their pay in between payday. And so a lot of it comes down to geography, right? It comes down to your own personal situation. It could be a single mom who's got 3 kids, or, and we'll talk about here in a minute, is it could just be a timing issue, right? It also could be a lack of financial education. There are a lot of people who spend and they start making financial decisions at an early age, and as they grow and their income grows, those things just kind of continue to go, right? And where you say, well, yeah, I was driving a car that cost me $600 a month when I was making dollars a year, and now I make $90,000 a year, so I should be driving a car that cost me $1,000 a month. And you don't take into account when you move into these nicer cars that The maintenance is more expensive and the upkeep is more expensive. Insurance is more expensive. Tires, goodness gracious. Timely for us doing this. I literally just took my wife's car to the shop today. And it's an SUV, and the cost for getting new tires on an SUV is outrageous, right? And so it really is, in broad terms, there's a lack of financial education in our country. I don't profess to know how to fix that, but I do know that companies like Immediate and a lot of other companies out there in the fintech world are doing their best to try to help solve some of it, right? And so we've talked about the rising cost of living. I do think that second piece that I just hit on a little bit is the mismatch of payday versus when bills are due. And so what we've found over the years at Immediate is that most financial stress is not necessarily about how much people make. It's about when they get paid versus when life happens. Well, one of the early taglines at Immediate was "Life doesn't wait 2 weeks," and obviously, what we meant by that is that unexpected things happen all the time. We hear about it on a regular basis. As we talk to people who are Immediate Pay users, since we launched our first client in September of 2019, we've had plenty of conversations, whether it's when someone comes in for a support issue, or we proactively send out surveys, or just conversational with some of the HR and payroll leadership that we talk to of some of our customers. And they share stories with us, right? In times before earned wage access was available, it would be something unexpected happens and someone has to go through this process of walking into their HR manager's office and shutting the door and saying, "Here's my situation, and I want to talk to you about if I can get an advance on my next paycheck." And so our Immediate Pay app and other similar earned wage access solutions have really kind of taken some of that process away, right? There's always some embarrassment that comes along with that, to have to go and sit down and ask your employer for money. You now have the ability to say, as I've worked shifts and clocked out, that's my money. It's just caught up in a payroll cycle. And so in order for me to access it, I just go into the app and see how much I have and can pull that down for free to a debit card or for a nominal transaction fee. And so what I think is really interesting is that most transactions are reactive transactions, right? And what I mean by that is one of our top use cases is someone gets in their car in the morning and they just don't have enough gas to get to work and back. And they go and they stand in front of the pump. If you guys are like me, you've seen this when you swipe your card, and these gas stations will put a hold on your card of $100. I've seen them as high. I got one day that was $176 hold on my card. And so when it's Wednesday and payday's Friday and your account balance is getting low and you swipe that card so you can put gas in your tank so you can make your 20-minute commute, and it pops back and says insufficient funds. Well, it's not because you're out of money. It's because you may just not have that 100, 150, $176 in your account. And so what people will do is on the spot, they'll go into the app and they'll say, "I need $100," or whatever the number is. They'll click transfer, and moments later, that money is in their account and they can swipe their card again and put gas in their tank to get to work. And so the point of that is that a lot of the use from an earned wage access perspective is reactive. The other thing that we see is that it is typically needs based, not wants based, right? In the early days when I would talk to people, they'd say, "Well, how do you know people aren't just going to pull money out and then go spend it on, go buy a case of beer and hang out till midnight with their buddies and sleep past their start time tomorrow?" And so this is actually enabling them to make bad decisions. My answer was, I can't tell you that that's not going to happen. I can tell you that if that kind of thing is going to happen, it's probably an employee problem, not a cash problem, right? And so what we've seen, fortunately for us, and quite frankly, to kind of make us feel better about society in general, what we've found is that 86% of earned wage access transfers are needs based. It's for groceries, it's for gas, like I just explained, it's for bills, right? And so what we've seen is that people are using this for things like putting food on the table or keeping their lights on. And really what it comes down to in most cases is a bill that's due on a day that is prior to payday, right? And so I actually was just with someone on our team recently who said that they had a support ticket where someone called in and said, I need to make a transfer. My cell phone bill for me and my two children of like $160 is due on Wednesday, and it's a 10% late fee. So that late fee is $16. If I wait until Friday when I get paid, I'm going to get hit with an extra $16 worth of fees. And so And so they went in and made a transfer and paid a flat rate $3.50 so they could access their money then and pay the bill on time. That kind of thing from an emotional perspective starts to relieve some of that financial stress, right? It's we like to say that that it's a financial relief versus financial indulgence. Okay. People are using this to relieve some of that stress versus going out and doing like the early days. People thought they were just going to go, buy a bunch of beer or take people out on fancy dinners or whatever it may be. It's people aren't necessarily using EWA to get ahead. They're using it to stay afloat, right? And so when we think about financial literacy, since April is Financial Literacy Month, it's not just about budgeting spreadsheets, right? It's understanding cash flow. It's trying to better understand behavior, right? Like every one of us has spending behaviors. You can go back a couple of weeks on Business and Brews, and my wife and I talked about our different behaviors, right? I'm typically the saver, she's typically the spender. And so what I have to do as the saver is try to plan out and understand timing of our bills, timing of what we're trying to save up for. If we've got a vacation that we're planning to go do this summer, how much are we going to set aside and make sure that that's going into an account where it's not being touched? Because I know that like the behavior of if we see it there, my wife may say, well, the money's in the account and we need to do this. Being very candid, we had a conversation like that about our yard recently. We had to have a couple of trees taken down because one of them was diseased and it was creating issues in our yard. And so we had to have these trees cut down. And once the trees came down, I thought it was over. And then she came back and said, well, hey, no, now we've got to get the yard fixed. And it was an unexpected expense that we just had to go through and talk about and understand like, all right, well, hey, now's not the right time. We just spent money on taking these trees down and there's just not a whole lot of extra cash available. We need to wait. And let's create a goal and let's negotiate. And let's try to check a couple of different places and find what the best price is. And that's what we've done. And we've kind of plotted out this plan, right? It's understanding behavior. And obviously, if you're married or have a significant other, understanding that behavior alongside them is really a big piece of the puzzle. I think a lot about when you talk about timing and you talk about what's coming down the pike as it pertains to your bills, knowing when bills are due, knowing what is coming. If there's, like I said earlier, a vacation or kids going to college or whatever it may be. I was thinking about it and I was on a flight recently and I was kind of thinking about some of the things of preparation for this. And an analogy kept popping in my head, maybe just because it's April and baseball season just started. But I remember an interview with Javi Lopez from the Atlanta Braves, and I was a huge Braves fan growing up. I used to watch the Braves like all the time, and it was the years when it was John Smoltz and Tom Glavine and Javi Lopez and Greg Maddux and all these guys that were just incredible baseball players. And generally speaking, I think really, really good people. And so I saw this interview with Javi Lopez, who was the catcher, and he was talking about a game when they were playing the Houston Astros. And there was this guy that played for the Astros named Jeff. He was just incredible. He wasn't a huge guy, but he was just really thick, really muscular, and he could just crank the ball. And so coming into the game, Javi said that he was talking to Maddux, and Maddux was known for playing chess when other people were playing checkers, right? He was just a great pitcher, had really good, solid control of his pitching, had an incredible breaking ball, and wasn't like the fastest pitcher, but just could put the ball wherever it needed to be. So Javi and Maddox are talking before the game, and they're going through the lineup, right? Like think about this from a financial literacy perspective. Think about understanding your cash inflows and outflows, right? They're going through the lineup before the game and they're going player by player and they're looking at their average and they're looking at their home runs. They're looking at their on base percentage. They're looking at how many times people have been struck out. And so he's trying to build out a strategy for each player. So he's got 9 guys he's got to pitch to, and they're coming up with a strategy for 9 different players. And they get to Jeff Bagwell, and Jeff Bagwell, again, big hitter, had been cranking a lot of home runs. And so from what they had seen in the scouting reports, he said, look, we're not pitching inside on Jeff Bagwell. So let's just make sure that we're lining up outside. We're going to keep it outside. We're going to try to make him lean for the ball and not be able to turn his hips and get on it. And so he's like, fast forward to the 7th inning, and Bagwell comes up to the plate and there's nobody on, and the Braves are up by like 4. And Maddox calls time and calls Javi out to the mound, and he says, we're going to go inside. And Javi looked at him and he goes, well, I thought you said we're not going inside. And he goes, we're going to go inside. And he goes, all right. He says, your game. Goes back, throws it inside, and Jeff Bagwell just blasts one. I think Javi's quote was, "It went 1,000 miles," right? Like he just crushed it into the upper deck. And so after the game, Javi walks up to him and says, "Man, what are you doing?" And he says, "They're a good team. We're going to play them again in the playoffs, and I want Jeff Bagwell to be expecting that inside pitch that he hit into the bleachers." And so fast forward a few months later, they play them in the playoffs. It's the seventh or eighth inning. Bases are loaded. It's a tie ball game, and Bagwell gets up there. And in Bagwell's mind, he's remembering the last time he went up against Maddox. Inside pitch, fastball, takes it to the bleachers. And so Maddox throws 3 changeups away, strikes him out, right? And so it's just this great story of like, hey, Maddox was willing to take an L in the regular season because he wanted to get the win in the postseason. There are times in life, and there are times with our finances that we've got to take an L, right? We've got to cut back. We've got to go, all right, listen, I'm not going to go do this over the next month. I'm going to stop going out to eat for a month so I can save up a little money so I can have the win in the future, right? So it's really understanding what's coming. If you've got a really big fall coming up, and like our kids are doing sports, and if we got to travel, we know we've got to start to set things aside. We've got to be looking ahead. So understand what's coming from your schedule, from your finances, all those things. And if you're planning for those, you're going to do better. And if the general idea of that is that financial literacy, it's not about being perfect with your money. It's about being prepared. And it's about being prepared for kind of those peaks and valleys of income, right? The peak is on payday, and the valley is typically closest to the next payday, and how you can navigate those things. So to give you kind of 3 practical takeaways before we land this plane here, in honor of Financial Literacy Month, these are kind of 3 practical things that I hope will make your day-to-day financial life a little bit better. So the first one, as we've been kind of talking about here, is really just understanding not only your income, but also your cash flow. So I encourage people all the time to set up a calendar. You can do it in a spreadsheet. You can do it in your phone. You can do it at whatever makes the most sense for you, right? A place where you can go in and look and see it regularly. But you want to understand what day is payday. If you're actually getting paid on Friday, or if you're banking with someone who does the 2-day early pay, when that money comes in, right? People love that benefit of, I can get paid 2 days early. I tell people that's a one-time benefit, right? The first time you get it, it's great, man, I got paid 2 days early, but now you're used to getting paid on Wednesday instead of Friday. So regardless of what day you're getting paid on, just understand, and you need to make sure that you know which day that money is coming in, and then understand when your major bills are and when those things are going out. People typically don't have money problems. They've got timing problems, right? If you're living within your means, you're making good decisions. You're trying to drive a car that you can afford. You're trying to live in a place where the rent's not too crazy, where you can afford that. Those are the kind of things that are kind of 101. But once you get there, it really comes down to understanding cash inflows and outflows, and making sure that you've got the money set aside and the money's ready. And in the event that those days don't match up, that you've got a plan for that. The second piece is to build a buffer. I remember seeing a stat a few months ago that said, I'm going to have to go back and double check on this, but I want to say it was like 40% of the population doesn't even have $500 in savings. That's a difficult place to be, because if there's a situation where there's a layoff at work or something unexpected happens, it's kind of crazy, right? Like my wife needing tires, not having a little bit of a buffer is going to be a problem. And so the thing that happens here that I see and I hear the most is when people think about savings, they think about, oh, I need 6 months of my living expenses. And while you may need that, right, that would be a great thing to have. Please don't get me wrong. In a lot of cases, when there's such a big goal, and let's just say you whiff on it in month 1, or you just don't quite hit your goal for month 1, then you're frustrated and you kind of give up and go, I'm never going to get to 6 months of savings. And so I think it's important that you just start small and you say, hey, look, this month, I want to make some changes, and I want to try to save $100. And next month, I may try to save $150. And I just want to try to get to a place where I feel comfortable. There is no perfect number, right? There's everybody's got their own situation and their own cash requirements. But just understand that having a little bit of a buffer each month and kind of compiling that, whether you're putting it into a savings account, whether you're whether you're putting it into a CD so it can grow, but you don't have that liquidity. Maybe you put it into a money market account. There's a lot of different things you can do, but just remember, I mean, it's the same as most things in life. It doesn't need to be perfect, right? Progress beats perfection. So think about that and start working on that. Just have that small buffer and really start to build it out. But the last thing here, the third actionable, kind of practical use is to look for tools that make sense for you, right? The first thing I always did, like when I was first got into the professional world, is I had a spreadsheet and I would put on my pay date, and then I would plug everything in, and then I would go through and we would create a budget for, this is how much rent is this month, this is how much our bills are, this is how much the car costs, this is how much the utilities are, and I would kind of document all those things, and then I would track it. And then every 3 months, I'd kind of go in there and make some tweaks, right? And I'd see places where, like, all right, I'm under budget here, I'm over budget here. Let's start to move these things around. But really, what it did was it helps you start to really understand your financial life. That's a really important piece of the puzzle, right? Because when unexpected things happen, if you know, and I know people who know down to the penny how much is in their bank account at any given time, and other people who just have kind of a ballpark, but a general feeling of where it is. But what you want to do is you want to find tools that you'll use, right? That's the best one. The best one is not, I can't sit here and say the best tool to use is XYZ budgeting app. I can't tell you that. I can tell you that it's the best one is the one that you're going to actually use. So test a few, try to figure it out. If you can set up alerts with your bank where when you drop below a certain amount of money in your accounts, or you can find an app that helps you kind of better understand inflows and outflows. Those are the things that you're going to actually use are the ones that are most important. So, but I would strongly encourage that you find tools that are going to help you reduce some of the stress that you have from a financial perspective. So that's all I've got. I know this is a little different than a typical Business and Brews. I hope this was still valuable. If you're still listening, I hope you got value out of that. I guess the closing thought would be that if money has ever felt stressful to you, I know it doesn't put more money in your account, but it should make you feel a little better to know that you're not alone. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are navigating this. We're all on a financial wellness journey. We're all in different places on that journey, and all of us have been able to figure things out in different ways. And I know that money is typically like a taboo thing. You're kind of raised like, don't talk about politics and don't talk about money, don't talk about how much you've made and things like that. Like, I get that those things are ingrained in a lot of us. But I do think it's important to look for people that you see that maybe are a little further ahead of you, and to go sit down with them and say, can you help me? Right. I've got a couple things I'm working on, and I need to better understand my money situation, my cash flow situation, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help. There's obviously people that you can go pay to help you. There's also people that you probably know that could be kind of financial mentors to you. And I'd encourage you to do that. So as a final statement, financial literacy is not about having all the answers. I certainly do not have all the answers. Again, go watch the episode with me and my wife. We're still figuring it out, right? It's not about having all the answers. It's about making slightly better decisions and doing that a little more consistently. So if you do that, you're going to be on the right path. So hope you enjoyed this. We'll be back next week where I'm interviewing somebody and we're talking more about business, but thought in honor of Financial Literacy Month, this would be a good one to share with you guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.